You know what? I'm sure 31 franchises are extremely happy that I'm making this video as early as I am. We're doing another offseason preview video talking about the next two teams who were eliminated. That's the Anaheim Ducks and, stunningly, the Boston Bruins. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. It really does help the channel. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Also don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all that was discussed here today. So in today's video, as we talked about just with the last two videos that we did talking about the off-season preview, we did the Predators and the Kraken, we did the Blackhawks and the Sharks. We're doing the next two teams who were eliminated in this video, and that's the Ducks and the Bruins. In these videos, I look at the stats that they had, their point scoring leaders, goal scoring leaders, goals for, goals against, power play percentage, penalty kill percentage, and three reasons I think these two teams missed the playoffs. I then go through their UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason, and then I give 5 ways I personally think these two teams should go about in the offseason to try and improve this team for the future. So we're going to start off with the Anaheim Ducks. They were the first of these two teams eliminated. They were the 5th team eliminated in the West before any team in the Eastern Conference was eliminated, so you can definitely see that even though they were one of the first teams eliminated, being the 5th team eliminated in the West is not overly bad. Ducks actually had a better season than I was expecting. They did all right this year. They weren't extremely close to a playoff spot, but they were all right. If you look at their point and goal scoring leaders, their point scoring leaders is Troy Terry, who had 53 points, not too surprising there. Mason McTavish, who in a contract year has put 50 points, really good from the former 3rd overall pick. And a stunning one, 3rd on their team in the point scoring category now, is Jackson Lacombe. The rookie defenseman has 43 points. I know Lane Hudson's getting a lot of attention in the Calder race, but I mean, like, Lacombe's looking absolutely fantastic for the Ducks. If you go over to the goal scoring side, McTavish leads the team with 21 goals, and that's followed by Troy Terry, Frank Vetrano, and Leo Carlson, who all have 20 goals. So a couple of 20 goal scorers, not a whole bunch though. So interesting note there. Once again, if you can have like a 30-35 goal scorer, that's great. If you can have a player who can put you up like 65-70 points, that's great. It doesn't look like the Ducks are going to have either of those this year, so interesting note there. If you go over to the goals for, goals against, the special teams, if you look at those things, they currently have a record of 34-35-8. It's not a great record. They're all one game below 500, but they're still doing pretty good in a really tight Western Conference, so they did all right this year. Like I said, a little bit better than I was expecting. If you look at their goals for, they put 207 goals for, which goals for per game wise is 296 in the NHL. So it's not as bad as teams like Nashville or San Jose, but it's not overly great. If you look at the goals against category, they've given up 243 goals against, which is good enough for 22nd in the NHL if you go by goals against per game. So once again, it's not great, but it's a decent enough pickup there for the Ducks. So in the bottom half of the league in both the goals against and the goal scoring department, but they were still decent enough this year, and they're still around 500. So interesting note there, but like I said, they need some better goal scoring and could definitely use some stronger defense. If you look at their power play and PK percentage, they were also not really good. Power play was dead last in the NHL so far this year, running at 12.3% power play, which is 32nd in the NHL. That's not overly great. And their penalty kill wasn't too much better, running at 73.6 penalty kill percentage, which is currently tied for 28th in the NHL. So power play is not good, PK is not good, the goal scorer needs to be better, the defense needs to be better. Like, this team still has a little bit of ways to go before they're a playoff team, but they're still hovering around 500, which is really good there for the Ducks. They currently have about $39 million in cap space to spend for next year. 3 reasons I think this team wound up missing the playoffs this year. 1, like I just talked about, not enough goal scoring. This team has a couple of decent goal scorers, and I think in a couple of years' time, like if McTavish, Carlson, and a couple of other younger guys have some more years of experience, you could have a couple of 60, 70, maybe even 80-point players in the next couple of years. With where they are in their careers right now, it's just not going to happen at this point in time. And they're veterans, guys like Killorn, Vetrano, they're not having as good seasons as they have before. So once again, the lack of scoring, given the fact they're 26th in the NHL goals for per game, that's the whole big reason as to why this Ducks team wound up missing the playoffs. If you look at the other one, it's the Zegras and Gibson injuries. Gibson this year was in and out due to injuries. Dostal continues to shine, but he hasn't been as good as he was last year. Gibson's actually been stats-wise the better goaltender, and Gibson's been in and out of this year due to injuries, so that was a big big problem. Also, Trevor Zegras, he missed a bunch of time this year, again due to injuries. So once again, it's not his fault that he got injured, but still, that was a big blow to the Ducks team. And even though he hasn't been producing great, that's still a really big weapon that they lost. So the Gibson and Zegras injuries were a big reason as to why his Ducks team missed the playoffs. And the third was horrible power play. Like I said, this team is dead last in the power play unit. So I don't know what they need to do in the offseason, but maybe getting someone who's maybe more of a power play specialist and maybe having some of those younger guys grow could help that power play unit. But man, it was not great this year. So definitely the horrible power play unit, the injuries to Zegras and Gibson, and the fact that they did not have enough scoring this year were the three main reasons, in my opinion, as to why this Ducks team wound up missing the playoffs. So that's my season recap portion of it. Going over to the UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for the Ducks for this upcoming offseason. If you go to the UFAs, there's not a whole bunch here. We have Robbie Fabry, Brock McGinn, Justin Bailey, Oliver Shillington, and Ville Husso. Shillington's been in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries, had 4 points in 18 games. He was acquired at the trade deadline. I think there's a very likely chance he'll be let go as a UFA. Bailey, McGinn, both weren't really great big additions there for the Ducks this year. I think they'll probably leave as UFAs. Husso, same sort of thing. Decent third stringer guy, but I'm not sure if they'll keep him around. Probably walk as UFA. Robbie Fabry is the most interesting UFA name. They have 8 goals and 16 points in 44 games for Anaheim. Decent player and a really good type guy. I just don't know if the Ducks really want to bring him back. He did also suffer a little bit of injuries too. So interesting out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if basically all of their UFAs left as UFAs. Maybe they brought back 1 or 2. Fabry probably the most likely, but still interesting out there. If you go over to their RFA list, they have a ton of restricted free agents for this upcoming offseason. That's Mason McTavish, Sam Colangelo, Isaac Lundestrom, Nikita Nestorenko, Jan Mysak, Brett Liason, Drew Hellison, Lucas Dostal, and Cali Kling. Now, if you go to the goaltending side first, Kling's currently playing over, and I think it's the AHL or juniors. He's a guy who I think eventually will be the backup, but still not anywhere close to it, so I think he's probably going to get like a 1 to 2 league minimum deal. If you look at Dostal, he's still done decently this year. 23, 21, and 6 record with a 3.05 JA and 905 save percentage, which is not overly bad numbers. I personally feel like Dostal's probably going to get a big raise. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a 4 to 6 year deal in like the $5 to $6 million range. So I definitely think Dostal staying. Their one lone defenseman RFA is Drew Hellison. He had 4 goals and 13 points in 51 games this year. It worked out really well as like a third pair defenseman after being called up. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got like a 2 to 3 year deal, maybe on the lower end side of things money wise, to stay with Anaheim. You also got Brett Liason and Nikita Nestorenko, who got into a couple of games this year, put up some decent point totals. But I think both could be decent bottom 6 forwards. Wouldn't be surprised if they were brought back. Jan Mysak, wouldn't be surprised if he was let go or brought back. And then you got their 3 big ones on the forward group. Isaac Lundstrom, who had 15 points in 74 games. Decent bottom 6 guy. Wouldn't be surprised if they let him go, but also wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back. You have Sam Colangelo, who had 8 goals and 10 points in 27 games. Looks like a very fantastic top 9 forward of the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back, maybe on like a 2 year deal. And then you've got Mason McTavish, who had 21 goals and 50 points in 71 games this year. He's in the top 3 in the point scoring category, leads the team scoring wise. So McTavish is going to be a big one. They either sign to like a 3 year bridge deal, like $6 to $7 million, or try and sign him on like a really long term deal. But either way, most likely Colangelo, McTavish, Lundestrom, Nestorenko, Liason, Hellison, Dostal, Klang are all probably going to be brought back in the RFA category. If you look at the pending draft capital for Anaheim for 2025 draft, they currently have 9 picks in this year's draft. They have their own first round pick. They have the Jets second round pick. They have their own and the Toronto Maple Leafs third round pick. They have the Red Wings fourth round pick. They have theirs and the Oilers' 5th round pick, as well as their own 6th and 7th round pick. So a ton of picks, 2 more than the average team would probably have. An extra 5th rounder, an extra 3rd rounder, and a pick in every round of the draft. So not too bad there. They're probably going to have another top 10 pick this year. So interesting out there, but that's interesting draft capital there for Anaheim. It's a decent amount, and the same amount of sounds that in Chicago had. And lastly, going over to 5 ways I can see this team trying to go about this offseason to improve. So 1 has to be the extensions for McTavish, Colangelo, and Dostal. Those 3 have become really key pieces to that team. McTavish is a extremely talented top 6 center. When you go over to Colangelo, like I said, he's been a really good goal scorer. I think eventually could be a 30-40 goal scorer. And Dostal looks like he's going to be the starter in maybe the next year or 2 for Anaheim, especially if the Ducks move off of Gibson. So I think those 3 RFA contracts are going to be priority number 1 for the Anaheim Ducks entering this offseason, because I think signing these guys to extensions before it gets too late into the offseason are going to be important deals for the Ducks, as I do think all three of these guys are going to be huge pieces for next year for the Anaheim Ducks. So priority number one is signing McTavish, Colangelo, and Dostal. Priority number two has to be moving Gibson. At this point, Gibson rumors have been going around for the past 2 years. He definitely needs a fresh start. Dostal's passing him on the depth charts. He's becoming more and more of a backup goaltender. He's still putting up decent numbers, but he does not fit well with the timeline of that rebuild. So I personally feel like Gibson will probably get moved this offseason and will probably headline the goalie market. Not sure which teams will try to acquire him. Part of me thinks Edmonton. We've heard Carolina's name. I do wonder about a team like Detroit or Pittsburgh. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but definitely expect a Gibson move in my opinion in this upcoming offseason. Third is going to be figure out what to do with Trevor Zegras. The past 2 years have not been overly great for Zegras. He's been out a whole bunch of times due to injury, and when he's been in the lineup, he has not been his usual dynamic self. Now, it does seem that he's trying to fit into the new scheme fit with new coach Greg Cronin from a couple of years ago, but it's not looking like Zegras is his usual productive self over the past couple of years. So they really need to figure out what to do with him. He's going to be interesting in the final year of his deal this offseason. If he gets to RFA status, would he really want to sign in Anaheim after all the stuff that he's been through over the past couple of years? I'm not exactly sure, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Anaheim and Trevor Zegras, because I definitely think that if they do feel that they can sign him to an extension, they'll probably keep him and maybe try and work on some sort of an extension maybe before a season starts next year. But if it looks like he's not going to sign an extension, I wouldn't be one bit surprised if they try to find some sort of a trade partner, maybe the Rangers, the Sabres. We've heard some of those teams we mentioned. So you're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Zegras. Next would be to bring in a veteran top four defenseman. Now, if you look at this defense the Ducks have right now, it's extraordinarily young. Like, you have Lacombe, you have Mintyukov, you have Zellweger, you have Hellison, you have a couple other younger guys. Really, the only veteran currently on this Ducks team is Jacob Trouba. They moved off of Fowler and Dumoulin in season. So I think they could definitely benefit from adding someone who can play top 4 minutes, maybe on like the second pair. Not exactly sure who they try and target. There's definitely a couple of options out there if you look at it. Like a Mario Ferraro would make some sense in my opinion. Keandre Miller, Connor Murphy if the Hawks want to move on from him. Maybe there's a couple of other guys we could see, Jamie Oleksiak. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I think adding a veteran top 4 defenseman to sort of take off some of the minutes from their younger guys would make a whole bunch of sense, and also add a veteran presence on that blue line, which I think is desperately needed because the only veteran presence on that blue line right now is Trouba. And the last thing is add 1 to 2 top 6 forwards. Now, especially if they move off of Zegras, I think this team could use some more offensive weapons. I would not be one bit surprised if they took runs at some of the bigger players in free agency this year, like Brock Besser, Nikolai Ehlers, Mitch Marner. If any one of those three hit the free agent market, I would not be one bit surprised if the Ducks went heavily after them. I would also not be surprised if they tried to move some of the draft capital they have over the next couple of years to try and improve this team for the future. So I definitely think adding 1 to 2 top 6 forwards, especially if they move Zegras, will be a smart move from the Ducks. Once again, not sure who they could try and target, but I think that's probably the move that the Anaheim Ducks should go through. So those are the 5 things that I feel like the Anaheim Ducks should try and do this offseason to improve and get better for next year, so they can potentially push for a playoff spot and end this playoff drought that they're on right now. And next, going over to the Boston Bruins. Now, when it comes to the Boston Bruins, I don't think anyone was expecting this. The Bruins had a awful season. They're at a 32-39 record. They're either at this point in time the last or one of the last teams in the Eastern Conference. They had a 10-game losing streak, and that led to a sell-off at the trade deadline. Like, this team is not what it once was, and it's definitely been really bad for the Boston Bruins this year. So not overly great stuff. Look at their stats from this past year. So Pastrnak led the team so far with 41 goals. That's followed by Morgan Geekie, who has 30 goals, and Elias Lindholm, who has 16 goals. After that, you have Pastrnak, who has 100 points, who leads the team in points, followed by Geekie, who has 53 points, and Zacha, who has 45 points. So Pastrnak, still his usual self, putting up a whole bunch of goals, getting a whole bunch of points. But besides Pastrnak, this team has really not had that much offense. You expect Boston to usually have like 2, 3, maybe even 4, 60, 70-point players. They currently have 1, and that's Pastrnak. So, interesting note there, but the Bruins have definitely not had the greatest of stretches this year, and that shows in the point and goal scoring leaders. If you look at their goals for, they've scored 212 goals for, which is tied for 27th in the NHL. It is not much better than the Sharks or the Predators' offenses. So, that offense has not done overly good, and the defense hasn't done much better. They have given up 260 goals against, which is good enough for 20 25th goals against per game wise in the NHL. It's not overly great there for the Boston Bruins. So both their goal scoring and their goals for per game are in the bottom quarter of the league. That's not great news there for Boston. If you look at their power play and penalty kill, it's not much better. Their power play is running at 15.3%, which is good enough for 29th in the NHL. Their PK is running at 76.9%, which is good enough for 22nd in the NHL. So once again, power play, it's not as bad as Anaheim's, but it ain't much better. And penalty kill wise, they're still in the bottom half of the league. So all in all of their stats are in the dumpsters this year. Boston has not had an overly great season, and that's going to lead to a very intriguing offseason. They currently have about $27 million to spend in cap when it comes to this upcoming offseason. If you look at the three reasons I personally think this Bruins team missed, it's one, the banged up blue line. I know Swayman and Korpisalo have not been overly great this year, but you can't fault them for the injuries on the blue line. Carlo was injured for a little while there, but the majority of injuries have been to their top two defensemen in Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy. McAvoy's missed significant stretches of time this year due to injuries, and Hampus Lindholm has not played, I think, since November due to an injury he sustained as well. So Hampus Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy, both being injured were extremely big reasons as to why this Bruins team was so bad defensively, and a huge reason as to why this team missed the playoffs. The second reason was the deadline sell-off. I mean, this team was not close to a playoff spot. I think they were like 4 or 5 points out when it came to the trade deadline, but they moved off a whole bunch of pieces, Marchand, Carlo, Coyle, amongst others. They really did a full sell-off, and that led to them, the first few games were actually pretty good for the Bruins, but after that, it really fell flat and sent them on a 10-game losing streak. So all in all, it had not been overly great there for the Bruins after the deadline sell-off, and that's another major reason, in my opinion, as to why this team missed the playoffs. And the third one is goal scoring is not where it needed to be and not where it had been over the past couple of years. The last 2 years, the Boston Bruins were a top team in the NHL. They were one of the best teams in the NHL. 2 years ago, they had the best season to date in the regular season. But it hasn't worked out this year. Their goal scoring was not where it needed to be. Even when they had guys like Marchand and Coyle and Carlo, their offense was not where it was supposed to be. And they had so many problems putting the puck in the net this year that they really couldn't find much rhythm. It's a big chunk as to why this power play is one of the worst in the league. So all in all, the banged up blue line with injuries to Lindholm and McAvoy, the deadline sell-off, and the goal scoring not where it needs to be were the three main reasons, in my opinion, as to why this Bruins team wound up missing the playoffs. Next, going over to their UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason. If you look at their players entering UFA status, not a whole bunch here. They have Cole Kopke, Vinny Lettieri, Riley Tuft, Henry Jokiharju, Mitch Callahan, Parker Witherspoon, and Brandon Bussi. Bussi looks like he could eventually be a backup for Boston. Wouldn't be surprised if the Bruins try to sign him to like a 1 or 2 year deal. Witherspoon, Callahan, both decent like 7-8 defensemen. Wouldn't be surprised if they were let go. Could maybe see Witherspoon be brought back in like a 1 year deal. Henry Jokiharju, who's acquired the trade deadlines, also UFA, has got 3 goals and 9 points in 57 games this year for the Bruins and Sabres combined. Wouldn't be surprised if the Bruins try to sign him to like a 1 to 2 year deal to remain on that blue line. Also wouldn't be one bit surprised if he would hit free agency. Riley Tuft, Vinny Lettieri, both call-up options, gone to some game action this year. Wouldn't be surprised if both those guys left. And then you have Cole Kopke, who had 10 goals and 17 points in 70 games. Really good bottom 6 forward. Wouldn't be surprised if he got like a 1 to 2 year lower end deal to stay with Boston. So I could see Kopke, Jokiharju, and Bussi, maybe Witherspoon sign, but wouldn't be surprised if most of those UFAs leave. If you look over to their RFA side, you have Geekie, you have Lauko, you have Beecher, you have Konstantinov, Farinacci, Kuntar, Wallstrom, Mitchell, Lohrei, and Missul. Now Missul, Kuntar, Farinacci are all really good prospects. Wouldn't be surprised if they got like 1 to 2 year deals, but I could see him wind up not getting qualified. You have Mason Lohrei, who has 5 goals and 33 points in 74 games this year. Really good. Looks like eventually future top pair defenseman for the Boston Bruins. So I think they'll probably keep him. I could even see him sign a longer term deal. You have Ian Mitchell, who's another call-up option. Wouldn't be surprised if he was let go. Wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back on a cheap deal. Oliver Wallstrom, same sort of thing as Mitchell. Call-up option. Could see him maybe be brought back in like a 1 year short-term deal. Wouldn't be surprised if he was let go. Marek Konstantinov, who has 4 goals and 10 points in 72 games with the Wild and Bruins combined, was acquired at the deadline. Looks like a very fantastic future third line center for Boston, so I think he'll probably stay. You have John Beecher, Jacob Lauko, both are RFAs. Both have been really solid fourth line forwards for the Bruins over the past few years. Wouldn't be surprised if both those guys stayed. And then you have Morgan Geekie. This is going to be one of the bigger questions that we'll get to in a minute, but he had 30 goals, 53 points, 74 games. Wouldn't be one bit surprised if the Bruins try to sign him to like a 2 to 3 year deal. Also wouldn't be one bit surprised if he was traded, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I could definitely see a lot of these pending RFAs wind up coming back. Maybe a couple of them do wind up leaving. And lastly, going over to the current draft capital for Boston in 2025, they currently have 8 draft selections for this upcoming offseason, so only one more than the average team. They have their own first round pick, they have the Blues and Hurricanes second round picks, they have their third round pick, they have the Flyers fourth round pick, and they have their own 5th, 6th, and 7th round pick. So they have most of their own draft selections, only don't have their 4th round pick, they only have Philadelphia's, and also only don't have their 2nd round pick, they only have the Hurricanes and the Blues. So you still have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, not too shabby. They're going to have a couple of decent draft selections here, and once again, it could change before the draft actually happens, but at this current point in time, they have 8 draft selections, which for a Bruins team that kept on moving off pieces and moving off draft selections, it's not too bad, so interesting out there. And lastly, going over to 5 ways I can see this team improve in the offseason to get better for next year. Now, one, I think they need to use their high draft pick wisely. They're going to most likely have a top 5 or top 7, top 8 draft selection this year, and they're going to need to use that wisely because they could definitely get a really solid player if they were to get that draft pick. And there's a very good chance they could maybe try and win the draft lottery too, maybe get like a top 2 pick. So if they do wind up having a top 4 selection, I think they have to go after one of Martone, Misa, Schaefer, or Pagens. They have to go after one of those 4. Those are the top 4 prospects in my opinion going into this draft. So if they go fall out a little bit, they could go after a guy like Roger McQueen, Antoine Frondel. So there's a couple of options here, but I think the Bruins really need a very high level draft prospect they could develop and turn to a superstar at the NHL level. So priority number 1 is to use that high draft pick that they're going to have wisely. The second thing this team needs to do is to acquire a top 4 defenseman. They just moved off of Brandon Carlo at the trade deadline. They let go of Matt Grzelcyk in the UFA status last year. Zadorov has not worked out as a top 4 defenseman. This team could definitely use some top 4 help. Now, like I said, Lindholm, McAvoy are going to be their top pair next year. Lorai's turned to a really solid top 4 defenseman, but if they can get someone else to sort of round out the top 4, I think that would be a smart move there from Boston. If you can have Lorai, Lindholm, McAvoy, and someone else in that top 4, that would be a stellar top 4 for Boston. So like I said, not sure who they'll go after. There's a couple of trade options they could go after, like a Ferraro or an Alexiak or probably a couple of other guys. There's definitely going to be a couple of UFAs, not as much as there was a couple of months ago, but definitely that's not, there will be a couple of decent UFA defensemen. So we have to wait and see on that, but I think the Boston Bruins should go after a top 4 defenseman. Next, I think they have to consider moving Morgan Geekie, Pavel Zacha, Nikita Zadorov, or Elias Lindholm. The Zadorov and Lindholm signings have not worked out. They are being way overpaid at this point in time, and if the Bruins can find some creative way to get out of those 2 contracts, I would not be one bit surprised if they consider moving Zadorov or Lindholm. When it comes to Geekie and Zacha, I could also see them try and move them, especially if they don't feel like they're going to be competitive in the next year or 2. Geekie was mentioned a lot during the trade deadline as a potential trade candidate. I'm not sure if Geekie really wants to sign with Boston given how poorly this team is turning out to be right now. So I think there's a very likely possibility the Bruins could try and move Geekie and get a decent return. On top of that, when it comes to Pavel Zacha, I think he's got 2 years left after this year at 4.75. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if Zacha really didn't want to stay in Boston. The Bruins tried to move on from him, and I think they could get a really solid return because Zacha's a really solid top 6 center or winger. He can play either or. So interesting out there, but I definitely think that moving guys like Lindholm or Zadorov or Geekie or Zacha have to be in the top priority of Boston Bruins things to do this offseason. Next, I think this team needs to add a top 6 forward to play with David Pastrnak. They just moved off of Brad Marchand. They moved off of Charlie Coyle. Those were 2 guys who were playing well with Pastrnak this year. If they move off of Geekie, who's been a mainstay on Pastrnak's line this year, I think they definitely need to go out and try and add a top 6 forward. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to go after a big pinning UFA top 6 forward like Anaheim would possibly, with guys like Betzer or Ehlers or Marner or someone like that, someone who can play with Pastrnak on that top 6. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to use some of their draft capital to try and go after someone who can play in the top 6 and maybe with Pastrnak in the trade market. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I think adding a top 6 forward is going to be a big thing for the Boston Bruins this this offseason. And lastly, adding some bottom 6 for help. This team has definitely lost some of their depth more over the past couple of years. I think they can add some shorter term bottom 6 help. That would be smart. Like, they still have guys like Kostelic, Kopke, Beecher, Lauko. They still have some decent guys, but they can get like some pending UFAs who they can maybe sign like 1 to 2 year deals, maybe at like around maybe $2 million, sort of like that Morgan Geekie contract they signed a little while ago, and it can really help fit in and sort of round out that bottom 6. I think that'll be a smart move there from Boston too, just to round out that 4 group and give them some more depth. So interesting out there, but those are the 5 things I think that this Boston Bruins team should do in the offseason to improve and get better and try and get back to the playoffs after making it 8 years in a row and then missing this year. So definitely that's all I'm going to talk for today. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. What was your opinion on these two teams? Are you surprised the Bruins and the Ducks missed the playoffs this year? Are you surprised that both teams didn't make the playoffs? And what do you think these two teams should do in the offseason to try and improve and get back to the playoffs next year? Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video. If you're liking, subscribe below. It really does help our channel on the road to 500 subscribers, so don't forget to do that. And don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section below. I also have a blog, talking news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link that down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.